Good afternoon, sir. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, I can, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lenton-Smith, we were about to turn to the Cleveleys case.
Right.
And I'm going to attempt to deal with matters chronologically. Can we start, please, with what happened on the 20th of August 2003 by looking at FUJ 0012-1482. And we can see here, looking at the bottom part of the email first, an email from Jan Holmes to you of the 20th of August.
Yes.
2003. And we can see the subject matter is Cleveleys, as he's described it, Horizon Equipment. And to your knowledge, to your memory, was this your first involvement in the Cleveleys case?
I believe so. I mean, I haven't got any other documentary evidence to suggest that.
And nor have we.
No, okay.
What role did Jan Holmes perform at this time?
I believe he was the audit manager. I'm not sure what his title is.
If we flip over the page, we can see his signature block describes himself as a program assurance manager. What's one of those?
A faculty to ensure the overall integrity of the program.
Back to the first page, please. What relationship, therefore, professional relationship, did Jan Holmes have to you or with you?
Okay, so he was a colleague, not within the commercial function, but matters that dealt with that he came across that were of a commercial nature or had been flagged up by Post Office as of commercial nature would come to me, and we would discuss the points or take them forward.
And therefore, did you work quite closely with him when the occasion arose?
Yes.
Reading the email, Colin, nothing is as clear as it seems. I have some papers faxed over from Post Office, and this is my proposed reply. I've had it technically checked by Mick. Just stopping there, would you understand that to be a reference to Mick Peach?
I believe so, yes.
Are you happy with it? Jim is Jim Cruz with Post Office Legal Services, their in-house Sollies, i.e. solicitors.
Yes.
And then he sets out a draft email. If we scroll down, please. Jim, for clarification, I'm not part of Fujitsu's legal department. My role in Post Office account is restricted to assisting Post Office with litigation support as and when it's required. Does that accurately describe his role?
I think it's part of his role.
And
I think his role was wider than that, but within his function, within his job, that's what he did.
And so relevantly, it was his role.
Yes.
Relevantly to this issue.
Yes.
Thanks for the papers. I've done some preliminary work, and perhaps inevitably, the picture's not as clear as we might wish. Let me start with the easy stuff, and then numbered paragraph 1. We will have no record of any transaction data from Cleveleys dated before November 2000 in the Central Audit Archive, since this is automatically deleted 18 months from the date that it is written. So if 30th of November was the last active day for the counter, just stopping there, that was the last active day for Julie Wolstenholme's employment and operation of the counter. That data would have been deleted on or about 30th of May 2002. And then 2, similarly, there'll be no help desk logs, since these are also deleted after 18 months. Just pausing there, can I look at some documents that predated this to work out what had happened in this claim? Can we start, please, with poll 0011-8218. This is part of the trial bundle for the claim between the Post Office and Julie Wolstenholme. Do you see that?
Yes.
And if we go, please, to page 10. and look at paragraph 14. This is part of what's called the defence and counterclaim. So it's Mrs. Wolstenholme's defence to the claim that the Post Office brought against her for delivery up of computer equipment. And she says it was an implied term of the contract between the Post Office and Julie Wolstenholme that the computer system provided by the Post Office would be fit for its purpose, and the Post Office is in breach of this term in that the computer system was unfit for its purpose, and the Post Office failed to ensure that the system was working adequately. Julie Wolstenholme has supplied the Post Office with details of the persistent inadequacies of the said computer system. And then if we go forward to page 12, we'll see that the date of that document is the 6th of June 2001. And so it seems from this that the operation and adequacy of the Horizon system was in issue in the proceedings from the beginning of June 2001. Can you see that?
I can see that, yes.
Then if we go forwards to page 95, please. And look at paragraph 4. This is the Post Office's response to what was said in the document I've just shown you. And it said it's denied that the said computer system was unfit for its purpose, and it's averred that the same worked adequately. And then if we go forwards to page 99, please. This is an order of the court of the 21st of August 2001. If we just look at paragraph 3, each party do give standard disclosure to the other by serving copies with a disclosure statement by 21st of October 2001. Now, you wouldn't have seen any of these documents at the time, is that right?
In 2001?
Correct.
No, I hadn't seen these documents, no.
You would agree, I think, looking at them now, that the operation and adequacy of the Horizon system appears to have been an issue between the Post Office on the one hand and Mrs. Wolstenholme on the other.
That's what she claims, yes.
Well, that's what the document
says, yes.
Yes. She claimed it, the Post Office denied it.
Yes.
At that time, mid-2001, if Horizon data was kept for 18 months, that would include all of the relevant data from Horizon relating to the Cleveleys branch in the period February to November 2000, wouldn't it?
It would have not been deleted.
It would have not been deleted.
In the 18 months, yes.
In that 18 months. The relevant period in the claim is, I should have said, is between February 2000 and November 2000.
Yes.
In the light of those documents, would you expect the Post Office to approach Fujitsu to seek such data?
In any other instance, one would have expected that to happen, yes.
I.e., the period is February to November 2000. We know there's an 18-month deletion policy. We better ask Fujitsu not to delete or destroy the data.
Yes.
Did you ever come to know why the Post Office did not ask that of Fujitsu?
I don't know why they didn't. And I think in some of the documentation, Jan Holmes's part of the issue was that it took such a long time to get Fujitsu engaged in providing information that by that time it was too late.
I mean, as we've said, the first involvement that we can trace, certainly for you, was the email of the 20th of August 2003.
Which was after the date.
Which was too late.
Too late.
But you later, I think, came to learn of the failure of the Post Office to ask Fujitsu to not delete or destroy the data. Was there any conversation between Fujitsu and the Post Office about how this had come to pass, how this state of affairs had occurred?
No. By which time I think it was almost a pointless conversation because they knew it had been deleted and therefore the conversation wouldn't go anywhere.
Would there be no point in such a conversation?
There might have been a point of the conversation, but by that time, by 2003, when I was involved, and subsequently when Keith Baines wrote to me, it was a fait accompli. The data had gone. So we're looking for other ways to try and validate the Horizon system or refute the allegations from that are being made against it.
Thank you. That document can come down and we can go back to Fujitsu 0012-1482. This is the email. Scroll down, please. So we dealt with paragraph 1 about the deletion. Paragraph 2, similarly, there will be no help desk logs, since these are also deleted after 18 months. Do you know whether that's true or false?
I don't know.
Did you see in the claim help desk logs produced? In order for Mr. Coyne to opine on their contents?
I can't remember. I'd have to go look at their respective, his report and our commentary on his report.
Okay, well, we'll get to that in the chronology, but keep that in mind. Mr. Holmes says that records of transactions cannot be retrieved if a counter has been switched off for 35 days. Did you know whether that was accurate or not?
I believed it was around a month that the transactions would sit on the counter for a month.
Paragraph 4. Mr. Holmes says, under no circumstances will we allow a third party direct access to a counter. The file store is encrypted, and for a third party to make sense of the data, we'd have to release to them details of the encryption key. This we would not do. And so the third party access, who did you understand that to refer to?
I'm not sure because I haven't got the faxed questions that come in from post office as to what this is answering. So I'm not sure who he's referring to in terms of a third party. At that point, it wasn't an expert, I don't think.
If we go further down on the page, please. How we can help. Number one, if this is to be pursued, then the work would have to be undertaken by our technical specialists in Bracknell, possibly with the third party in attendance as an observer. Said third party would require to be security cleared before being allowed access. Again, does that help you to understand what was being sought here? Who the third party
I'm not
might
sure
be?
I'm not sure who the third party would be.
Again, if we can pause this for the moment and jump ahead a little and look at something that was written later about this stage in the episode, can we look at Fujitsu 0012-1485? This is just to date the document that we're about to look at. It's 6 or 7 months later. It's an email from Jan Holmes to you, and he says that, Colin, it's an early view of where I am with a reply to Keith's letter. We're going to come back to that when we get to it, but in the course of this, he says something about this early stage. If we can go forward to Fujitsu 0012-1486. Thank you. So this is the attachment to the email. So we can treat this as being February 2004.
Yeah.
The 18th of February 2004. And it's the background section. Mr. Holmes says Pole have been in dispute with postmaster of this outlet since mid-2000. Essentially, Post Office had made a claim against the postmaster for losses at the outlet, against which she had counterclaimed that the problem was caused by the Horizon system, and she was refusing to release the equipment as she believed an examination of it would vindicate her. A court order was made on the 19th of February 2003 that a computer expert examined the equipment. Post Office POA's first involvement, I think that essentially means Fujitsu's.
Joseph account, yes.
Yeah, Fujitsu's first involvement was a request made 8th August 2003 by Post Office that we provide a witness statement, quote, about the Horizon equipment and what it contains or doesn't, and give Mrs. Wolstenholme a chance to object. Post Office wanted the court to overturn the court order so that the Post Office would recover the equipment. On 20th of August, the fax was received from Post Office explaining the situation and requesting a witness statement to the effect that there was nothing on the equipment that would assist the postmaster in her claim, and that it should be returned. The following day, I replied by email stating that I was loath to produce a witness statement at this stage, but explaining what information existed on the equipment and what would happen if it was switched on, and that we would not allow third parties access. I also explained how we could help at Pole. I received no reply to this email. So again, from that, does it appear that not only was your first involvement in August 2003, but Mr. Holmes' first involvement was 2003?
Yes, in response to the fax.
And does that again accord with your recollection that the first involvement of Fujitsu was only in August 2003?
Yes.
And that highlighted paragraph there, the last one, the following day I replied with an email. That looks like the email that we've just looked at, doesn't it? It's the one saying the following day I replied. That looks like the draft we've just looked at, doesn't it?
Can we look at the email again?
Yeah, sure. You'll see that it doesn't say that he's loath to produce a witness statement. The email is 12 FUJ 00121 FUJ yes, thank you. And scroll down, please, at the draft.
On the next page, does it go on?
Yes, thank you.
No. Back again, sorry. So how we can help?
Sorry?
I was just looking at how we can help. I can't see a reference to the fact we're not going to produce a witness statement.
No. Do you know why Mr. Holmes would have been loath to produce a witness statement?
At this stage, he says. No idea.
We saw from the document we just looked at that Mr. Holmes added, after I sent this reply, there was no reply from the Post Office.
That's correct.
Does that accord with your recollection that the Post Office didn't reply?
Well, I don't know that because he sent it to... who did he send this to in Post Office?
We can look at the actual email sent, WITN 0460 0202.
To Jim Cruz. So I wasn't copied on it, so I'm not aware.
You wouldn't know whether
I wouldn't know whether he got a response or not.
That's the final email sent, and it's the addition is second paragraph, second sentence. Under the circumstances, it might be best to fully understand the position before I commit to writing a witness statement that you may later rely on in court.
Yes, okay, so that's kind of a toned-down version of his internal statement. Like, I'm loath to produce a statement.
So this is the email that was in fact sent to Jim Cruz, the lawyer at the post office on the 21st of August 2003. Let's assume that there was no reply. The next stage in the process is in 2004, in February. Can we move to poll 309-5375? I think this is a letter you've referred to already. It's a letter to you from Keith Baines.
That's right.
If we look at the second page, please. We can see it's from Keith Baines, contract manager. Back to the first page, 5th of February 2004. Dear Colin, you may be aware of the above case, which relates, amongst other matters, to the recovery by Post Office Limited of some Horizon equipment belonging to Fujitsu Services, which a former sub-postmistress at Cleveleys Post Office branch, Mrs. Wolstenholme, has refused to return. There has been previous correspondence with Jan Holmes of Fujitsu relating to this case. That's presumably a reference to the August 2003
Exactly. Yep.
exchange of emails.
Yeah.
Mrs. Wolstenholme has counterclaimed against the Post Office, and the essence of her claim is that deficiencies in the Horizon system in the service provided by the HSH resulted in her incurring costs and losing income because of the waste of her time. She's claiming that the Horizon system itself has caused losses in the sub-post office accounts, which Post Office Limited is claiming against her as being due to her fault. And she wants the computer equipment to be examined by an expert witness before she will agree to its release to Fujitsu Services from her premises. The County Court instructed the parties jointly to commission a report from an expert approved by the court. I enclose a copy of his report. As you will see, the expert's opinion is that the Horizon system installed at Cleveleys branch was defective and that the HSH was more concerned with closing calls than preventing reoccurrence of faults. As I'm sure you will understand, Post Office is concerned by these findings, not only in relation to this particular case, but also because of any precedent that this may set, and that may be used by the Post Office's agents to support claims that the Horizon system is causing errors in their branch accounts. Please can you advise me of Fujitsu Services' view of the main points in the report? If you do not agree with them, please can you suggest what information or advice Fujitsu Services can provide to the expert that might lead him to change his findings? An early response would be appreciated. When you got this, presumably you realised that there had been no correspondence between August 2003 and now February 2004.
Correct.
This was a potentially commercially sensitive matter for both the Post Office and Fujitsu, wasn't it?
Yes.
Were you aware at this time that any other post offices or sub-postmasters were claiming that the Horizon system was causing errors in their branch accounts?
I can't specifically say whether there were at the time. All I can state, as I put in my witness statement, is that I think at a commercial level, there were very few that were raised between Keith Baines and myself, where he required additional commercial discussions that beyond what was happening at the operational level in terms of witness support. Very few over the 7 years.
You put it, I think, at less than 5.
Less than 5, yes. I mean, over the time I was with on post office account.
For that 6.5-year period?
Yeah.
Were you aware by this time, February 2004, that there had been acceptance incidents relating to accounting integrity and discrepancies that had emerged during development into rollout and had persisted even after rollout?
No.
Were you aware at this time of the work that something called the EPOS task force had carried out during the development of Horizon and subsequent management decisions taken as to the ongoing electronic point of sale, the EPOS system problems?
No.
When you became responsible for managing the contract from March 2001, would you not look back at what had occurred to lead you to and Post Office to that point in terms of contractual amendments, changes that have been made to the contract because of, for example, acceptance incidents?
There's two things I think to say. Is that I think the position I was in mirrored what Keith Baines had reflected in his witness statement, was to say that the system had gone through acceptance. It had been accepted by Post Office, gone through acceptance test by Post Office. It was found to be working, and it was rolled out. And that was kind of the position overall. It was understood that within an IT system of this stage, of this size, that issues would arise that have to be corrected. It's the nature of software that it was going to have issues that would be corrected. But it's then the degree of impact that would have. But certainly the position from a commercial perspective, it may be that was what we felt at the time, and it mirrored exactly what I felt and what Keith felt, that actually the system was working. It was not an issue. There were no issues that significantly caused problems. And that was the stance. And that was how we were supporting Post Office in terms of providing data to them to substantiate any issues.
And so to summarise, your position is that because it had been through acceptance, the system must be working sufficiently well.
Yes.
Save that it was a large and complex system and therefore there would inevitably be glitches.
Yes.
Nothing greater than that.
No.
Had you been by February 2004 informed of something called the calendar square bug?
No.
Had you ever heard of that?
I've never heard of it.
Had you, by 2004, been told about something called the lock bug?
No.
Or the outstanding lock on the run?
No.
Had you, by 2004, been told about the data tree build failure bug?
No.
Had you been told about the gyro bank discrepancies bug?
No.
Had you been told about the counter replacement bug?
No.
These are all bugs that the High Court was subsequently to find existed and predated, in part, 2004.
Right.
You hadn't been told about any of those?
No.
Would you expect to be told about those? So bugs, fundamental bugs in the Horizon system that either were capable of or did cause discrepancies in postmaster accounts?
I think if it had become an issue of concern between Post Office and Fujitsu, that this would have been raised at a number of forums. But I'm not aware that that happened.
That can come down off the screen. Thank you. Taking a step back, at this point, what was the position was as follows, wasn't it? The court had said there should be a jointly instructed expert. Mm. An expert had been jointly instructed by the Post Office and Mrs. Wolstenholme.
Yes.
And he had produced a report that suggested that the discrepancies about which Mrs. Wolstenholme complained may well be as a result of defects in Horizon.
I believe that's what it says. I can't remember. It was only recently that I got his report.
I'm sorry, it was only recently.
It was in the bundle, his report.
Yes, but of course you got it back in 2004, didn't you?
I got it back in 2004, but I couldn't precisely remember what he said other than how we responded to it.
Were you aware at this time that the Post Office was prosecuting sub-postmasters?
I was aware of one or two of these instances, but not that there was anything. There's a great number of them.
I think the figures are between 2000 and 2015, so the entire period, some 844, resulting in some 705 convictions.
Yes. So I was not aware of the depth and intensity of their activity. As I said, the only ones that came up to me through Keith, through the commercial function, were a minimal number.
Why did some come up to you?
It's difficult to remember. I can't remember the specific. I know there were a few, as I mentioned. Why they were there, I can't remember. I'm trying to remember, but I can't remember.
Why might they come up to you as the contract manager?
Because there was either an obligation or perhaps something that we were not fulfilling, or they wanted to ask for additional assistance that was beyond the scope, or maybe witness statements which were beyond them. Perhaps were getting more frequent, or perhaps the number of data extractions were beyond the limits that we had agreed.
If we go back to the letter from Mr. Baines to you, poll 309 5375. I look at the last paragraph on the first page and the last sentence. As I'm sure you'll understand, Post Office is concerned by these findings, not only in relation to this particular case, but also because of any precedent that this may set, and that may be used by Post Office agents to support claims that Horizon System is causing errors in their branch accounts. Did you gain any sense at this time that the Post Office was seeking to cover up any defects in Horizon?
No.
Because admitting the contrary might be rather difficult in the round?
No.
That if the system was found not to be reliable, then it couldn't be used to trade, and that might lead to significant financial impacts on the Post Office as a whole?
No.
Was it ever expressed to you that Horizon and the continued operation Horizon was essential to the maintenance of a substantial number of Post Office branches, in particular rural branches?
Well, it was always the objective that there was a working system that would support communities.
I'm looking at it the other way round, that it was said that the existence and continuing operation of Horizon was essential to the maintenance of the full Post Office estate. If there were problems with the integrity of it, that represented an existential threat.
It was never put forward like that.
So here they're raising, in this last paragraph, if we just go back, please, the Post Office, a twofold concern. One, the impact on the case, and secondly, the use by others of the report to say that Horizon is causing errors. Yes? They're the two things that are pointed out. The one thing that isn't said in the letter is the Post Office is concerned by this report because it might be right.
No, because I think, even going back to Keith Baines' witness statement, it didn't occur that it wasn't. The statement was that it was working. and therefore it could not have been anything to do with Horizon.
So the one thing that we don't see in this letter is the Post Office is concerned because an independent expert commissioned jointly by us has pointed out defects in the Horizon system. He might be right, and we're operating a computer system that may be faulty. And you're saying that that wouldn't have occurred to the Post Office, in your view, because of an unshakable belief in the system?
Well, there was that, but also I think they wanted us to respond to the experts' report to try and balance what we thought, both of us thought, were inaccuracies or perhaps issues with the report. And therefore, as it stood, it was not something that they wanted to cause a precedent.
But they don't say in this letter there's anything inaccurate in the report, do they?
They don't. They say. Well, he says that the expert. No, he's talking about the expert's opinion that there is an issue with the system and the HSH. So he's asking us to respond to those comments.
But he's not asking you to respond in a neutral way, is he?
Neutral.
Please tell us whether the expert's right or not.
No, he's not asking that. He just please comment.
Would you agree that the way this is written is rather myopic? Narrow in perspective?
It feels as though it's one of concern. Surely not.
Was that an attitude that was prevalent in your dealings with the Post Office?
In the reliance on the system?
Yes.
Yes. Well, from a commercial perspective, from the commercial function, yes.
Did you ever get the sense that the Post Office thought that it must defend the system at all costs? Because if it didn't, then the viability of the Post Office counters business was at risk.
I think they were looking for assurance that the system was correct.
Not independence and neutrality as to whether the system contained errors.
I think there was I think the dialogue that you can see between us and the Post Office regarding the report was trying to create what we thought was a more balanced position on it, rather than letting the experts' opinion stand as it stood, which we felt hadn't gone into enough detail around the system to give it full credibility.
Can we move forwards, please, and look at Fujitsu 0012-1486. This is the report that Jan Holmes sent you on the 18th of February 2004. Remember, yes. I showed you the email before.
Yeah.
And if we pick up where we left off above the expert's opinion at the foot of the page. And so this is Jan Holmes' response or commentary upon Mr. Coyne's report.
Yes.
Did you ask Mr. Holmes to look at this?
Yes, so in response to Keith Baines' letter, we would have then discussed this.
Can you recall what your instructions were to Mr. Holmes?
To review the expert's report.
Were they loaded in any way, or were they to simply to look into it and report back?
No, I wouldn't say that we were loaded. I wouldn't want to do that. So I think we would say that we were trying to produce a balanced response.
And let's look at what Mr. Holmes' opinion or comments on the opinion were. He says, taking each opinion as it occurs in the report, I would offer the following by means of explanation, confirmation, or refutation. First heading, reasonableness of calls to HSH. The expert was unable to make direct comparisons between similar outlets due to the absence of records. While this was true of audit data formerly available to poll, Fujitsu are able to review an unregulated archive of records of the other installed 6 counter outlets over a comparable period. The table below shows the output from that analysis. And then if we go over the page to the analysis, you can see that Cleveleys is in the 5th and 6th row. Cleveleys 1 is all reports to the HSH, and Cleveleys 2 is if you strip out calls to the HSH in the course of rollout. Do you see that? Do you see
Sorry,
1 and 2?
Yeah, I can see 1 and 2, yes.
There's an explanation at the foot of the page if we just scroll down.
Yes, yeah.
So if we go up, please. You'll see that, assuming that it's appropriate to strip out the calls during rollout, Cleveleys has a total of 85 calls. And I think that puts it right at the top, doesn't it? It's the third highest.
Yes.
Showing 85 calls in a 10-month period.
Yes.
So quite a high number of calls asking for help.
Quite a lot, yes.
And so Cleveleys was third highest and broadly comparable with other outlets, doesn't it? That's what it shows.
Yes, I mean, I can't analyse the ratios of all the different types of calls, but yes.
If we scroll down, we can see what Mr. Holmes thought of it. Discounting rollout help desk calls, which should not have been addressed to the health HSH. It can be seen in terms of total calls made, third highest from 12, percentage that were non-advice and guidance, fourth highest, and percentage that were software-based, fifth highest. Cleveleys numbers are broadly comparable with the group of outlets. What was that supposed to, or what did that say to you? What's it supposed to show?
There was nothing particularly standing out that differentiated Cleveleys from anything else.
They were all getting a high number of calls.
Well, I don't know whether they're high or not. They're just a number of calls. I don't know whether they're respectively high or not.
Wouldn't you want to know that to draw anything from it?
Well, on the basis that the other outlets were not reporting problems, or that at least Post Office was not dealing with commercial in terms of prosecution, or then it was broadly the noise level of the system. So there's nothing significantly about Cleveleys compared to anything else.
Anyway, we can see what Mr. Holmes said at the foot of the page. Based on the analysis, last line, and without analysing each and every call record, it would be hard to dispute the opinion of the expert.
Yep.
And over the page.
That was the statement from somebody else, wasn't it?
Yes, he's quoting Elaine
Lane, yes.
Tagg. Yeah, thank you. Operator advice to reboot. You'll see what Mr. Holmes says. And then in his second paragraph, Mr. Holmes says, in this context, the opinion of the expert that, quote, this instruction treats the effect and not the cause is correct.
Yes.
But it's incorrect to assume that no further work is being done.
Yes.
Under Mr. Coyne's heading of defective equipment, the criticism that the technology installed at Cleveleys was clearly defective is subjective and is based on the raising of 70 HSH calls over a 10-month period. There's no attempt to substantiate the claim nor to draw any comparisons with external benchmarks. Whereas this report does compare it with some other benchmarks and finds that it's broadly comparable.
Yes.
And then summary, it's difficult to comment on the statement made by the expert in this part of his report about worrying discrepancies, although he is alluding to the fact that system errors may be responsible for this. This has been put forward by a number of postmasters in the past, and each time it's fallen when confronted with transaction data. This is hardly a withering attack on the expert, is it?
No.
For the most part, he says we can't really argue with what he says.
Correct.
In particular, because we haven't got the underlying data, we can't argue with what he says.
Yes, that's right.
There's no arguing about the qualifications of the expert.
No.
He's not inappropriately qualified or
No.
inexpert.
None at all.
There's no quibble on his figures.
No.
The figures that he does give are comparable to other branches. And there's no arguing with his general approach.
No.
Can we look, please, at FUJ 012 for 1490? FUJ 012 1490. And if we see the foot of the page, thank you, we've got Mr. Holmes's email to you of the 18th, and then your email 8 minutes later in the morning. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Jan, do we have the data stroke response that we stroke Pol have used before, which has countered the PM system problem allegation? Colin, you're picking up that last paragraph, aren't you, there?
I'm picking up the last paragraph, yes.
Why was your first reaction to seek the data and response that had previously been deployed successfully to counter the postmaster's system problem allegation?
I think it was because the expert's report was an allegation. And so we had responded to that. You know, it was an allegation without any evidence. Therefore, did we have any evidence?
Can we move forwards then to FUJ 0012 1512? This is a copy of the final report that you sent to Mr. Baines. We're now on the 20th of February. If we see the foot of the page, your letter to him, and then up at the top of the page, dated the 20th of February, dear Keith, I'm writing in response to your letter of, you say the 6th of February, I think it was the 5th of February, and note Post Office's concern in respect of the expert's opinion that the Horizon system installed at Cleveleys branch was defective and that the HSH was more concerned with closing calls than closing calls than preventing recurrence of faults. An appendix is attached which sets out Fujitsu Services' view of and responses to the main points in the expert's report. In respect of the earlier correspondence between Jan Holmes and Jim Cruz, we'd be prepared to discuss this further if this would help progress the situation. Again, I think that's a reference back to the August 2003 correspondence. So if we go over the page, please, to see the appendix, to see what has now become of Mr. Holmes's report. Can you see it says basis of response?
Yes.
Before addressing individual points from the expert's report, there are two key areas of understanding to be established. The first is the function and objectives of HSH. The second is the way that the Horizon system handles transactions should a reboot be required partway through a customer service. Under the heading Horizon System Help Desk, there's an explanation of it being the first line support. And then in the second paragraph, the one beginning depending on, there's an explanation of the second, third and fourth line supports. And in the last sentence, 3 lines from the bottom of that paragraph, it says rebooting the counter often meets that objective. This doesn't mean that a problem is closed at that point in time, as a detailed scrutiny of overall problem management process would reveal. Then under the heading transaction handling on reboot, there's an explanation of what happens if a postmaster reboots. And if we look at the foot of the page, it is said that if a session is interrupted pre-settlement, perhaps through a fault that requires a reboot, the session and consequently the session stack is not maintained and has to be restarted once the system has been returned to the postmaster. In 2000, the only exception to this were automated payment transactions. And the next paragraph, simply put, the design of the system precludes the possibility of a session stack being partially or doubly committed, and thus accounting errors cannot be introduced through a system crash or forced reboot. Then the table is reproduced. If we scroll down under the expert's opinion. Yes?
Yes.
Over the page, please. A line has been added after Cleveleys' numbers are broadly comparable with the group of outlets. Namely, it's worth noting that Fujitsu Services is not aware of similar complaints or claims being made from other outlets in the above list, some of which have higher call profiles than Cleveleys. Did you understand that to mean that we've picked 8 or 10 other branches and we are not aware of any problems or complaints of a similar nature being raised from them? Or was it more broadly, there are no similar complaints to the ones raised by Mrs. Wolstenholme ever having been made to Cleveleys?
I think he's referring to the above list.
Why wouldn't you address whether problems of a similar type or complaints of a similar type being made by any other branch?
I couldn't say.
Wouldn't that be the fair thing to do? Rather than pick 10 and say, we haven't had any similar complaints from them, we're not going to tell you about any similar complaints from the other 17,000 branches.
Possibly this analysis was about comparable outlets. So I think it was looking at system problems from comparable outlets rather than everything else. If it was everywhere else, 17,000 outlets, I think the volumes, if there had been such issues, would have been much worse and would have been escalated anyway.
But there's none of that referenced in here. I mean, we know now that the things of which Mrs. Wolstenholme complains, blue screening, balances, double counting on a reboot, money disappearing on a reboot, was a complaint that many, many postmasters made to Fujitsu. What this appendix does is it picks 10 and says we haven't had any complaints from them. Do you know why the full picture wasn't revealed?
I couldn't say.
If we carry on looking at this page, you'll see that under a series of headings, operator advice to reboot. In this context, the opinion of the expert that this instruction treats the effect and not the cause is correct, and then exactly the same as the previous draft that we saw. Summary of defective equipment, I think that's the same as the previous draft. Do you remember the passage from Elaine Tagg's witness statement?
Yes.
That seems to have been omitted. Do you remember the passage from her witness statement? if we just look at Fujitsu 0012 1486. Second page at the foot. Statement by Miss Elaine Tagg. You rightly corrected me that this was her speaking and not Mr. Holmes. A total of 101 HSH calls were raised between the 9th of February installation date and the 20th of November 2000 termination date, of which 15 are classified as advice and guidance, and 16 are to do with the rollout itself. Based on the analysis and without analysing each and every call record, it would be hard to dispute the opinion of the expert. We just go back to Fujitsu 00121 512, page 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5. It's been cut. Do you know why that was?
Can we go back to the previous page?
Previous page on here, yes. And please do scroll down, Frankie.
So her comment was about HSH calls, wasn't it?
Yes, and it being difficult to refute what the expert says.
Can we just go up a little bit?
Yes.
I'm not sure whether it added anything, having it in or taking it out.
You don't think it made any material difference?
No.
Why?
Because we're saying it's broadly comparable with everything, whatever's happening at Cleveleys is broadly in line, and that's what she's saying, effectively.
Okay, go to the last page, please. The conclusion is now the report presented by the expert is based on a simple analysis of HSH records and not a detailed understanding of how the system works or even the prime objectives of the help desk. Consequently, the opinions expressed in the report, while not always incorrect, do not present the whole story and are presented from a single perspective. What had led to the hardening up of this report compared to the first version we looked at?
So, of course, the previous versions were internal versions. I think we were trying to get to the position where we might try and expand the analysis and understanding of the expert, and whether, in fact, this was, if there were elements that we didn't quite agree with. Well, we're saying they're not always correct, but don't present the whole story that a balanced report should do.
And we're moving forwards now, and we're going to end at a point when Fujitsu accused him of bias, essentially, of lacking impartiality. That's where we're going to end up in the questions in about 45 minutes' time. What I'm asking now is what had led to this hardening up of a position. There was the internal document, which didn't question his qualifications, didn't really question his methodology, and said, we're in the same position as him. We haven't got that much data to go on. We can't really question what he says. Now that's being ratcheted up a bit, isn't it? They don't present the whole story. they're presented from a single perspective. I don't know what that means, but it seems rather critical, doesn't it?
Yes, it's critical of the report.
So what had led to the hardening up?
It can only be, well, I am not absolutely sure. I don't absolutely remember. But of course, Fujitsu is trying to defend Horizon, all the systems that go around it, support systems and everything else. And therefore, we're trying to position it, to put a position to Post Office that we want to present the whole story.
Can we move on, please? Fujitsu 00121533. This is an email of the 4th of March, and what we're going to see is this in this chain, you getting back the expert's response to your response.
Yes.
And so this is the Post Office lawyer, Jim Cruz, sending you and others an attachment. And then if we go to FUJ 00121534, we can see what the attachment is. It's an email which itself had an attachment. And this is the response from Susan Helliwell, the solicitor at Waitman's secretary. Yep. The response to the initial report of Jason Coyne of Best Practice Group has been sent to him, and his reply is attached. He has not taken on board any of the points made and has not revised his report at all. I will welcome any further points you have to make on his further report, but it seems to me that his report cannot be accepted by the Post Office, and that an application needs to be made to the court for Fujitsu to give evidence about the Horizon system and its working in view of the stance taken by the expert witness. And then if we can go to Fujitsu 00121535. This is Mr. Coyne's reply. Under the heading Horizon System Help Desk, he said this is a matter for Fujitsu and Post Office, i.e. describing the system of escalating help and service desks, but nothing contained within this section of the letter alters my current opinion. Transaction handling on reboot, whilst this section is helpful and assists my understanding, it would not be proper of me to alter my opinion based on this explanation, the supporting evidence of which has been destroyed. Reasonableness of calls, it's always been my express position that direct comparisons of calls to HSH are required, and your client's positions that they have been destroyed, barring direct comparison, and that I should give opinion on the surviving material that's available. Now it seems your client has located data that they believe enables comparison. Although that raw data has not been made available to me, they say it displays that Cleveleys is broadly comparable. As I don't have the raw data, I'm unable to say if my opinion is affected or not. And at the foot of the page, he says all these issues these issue factors are significantly higher for Cleveleys than the respective mean, which is inconsistent with the statement of broadly comparable when considering these measurements. Then over the page, although I must stress that no raw data has been presented, so I'm disadvantaged, is it your client's intention to rely upon this data sample referred to in this letter? Next two paragraphs I can skip over. Worrying discrepancies. I'm unsure how this can be resolved, as the documentation suggests the postmaster reported discrepancies that seem to fall after reported upgrade. In short, to answer the question posed in your letter, no, my opinion currently remains as stated in my original note. So this is a pretty firm reply from the independent expert, isn't it?
It is.
Did you think it called for a rethink by Fujitsu?
I think we waited for Post Office to see what their instruction was going to be, or how they wanted us to support them.
Was there ever any discussion of bringing in somebody else, somebody independent of Fujitsu, to look at what this expert was saying, to see whether it was entirely off the wall or there may actually be substance in it?
Not with me.
Were you aware of any discussions amongst other people?
I'm not aware of any other. I don't know. I couldn't say yes or no.
You were disappointed with this response from the expert, weren't you?
Yes.
If we look, please, at FUJ 0012 1549. Well, in fact, we better look at 1541 first. Thank you. 4th of March, so same day, at 11:30, you send Mr. Holmes the disappointing response from the expert.
Yes.
And then if we go to 1549, he replies at 1:45, so 2 hours, 15 minutes later, attaching his initial thoughts. And then if we go to 1550, this is Mr. Holmes' initial response. I'm not going to go through all of this, but would a summary be, we need to try and get the expert in to Fujitsu premises to see whether we can get him to alter his opinion?
Yes.
Mr. Holmes then goes on holiday for a week and produces a final version of this document, 1557. This is now dated the 11th of March and is the final version. I should have shown you the covering email. 155. Oh, thank you. I've done a bit more to this, but if I continue, I fear I might call him a git or something worse. Did you take that to be a good sign of objectivity of thought?
I think I just took it as being a moment of irritation.
Why would you be irritated? Why would he be irritated?
Don't know.
Why did you take it to be a moment of irritation?
I think I ignored it.
Why?
Well, he's going on holiday and he was trying to do something, get something out and what have you. So I think it was just in the heat of the moment.
He's been on holiday. This is when he's come back.
Oh, sorry.
He went on holiday on the 4th, said, these are my initial
I'm not
thoughts.
sure. I don't know why he's irritated by it.
He's come back on the 11th after a week,
Okay. I don't know
presumably
why.
being refreshed, thinking
Yeah,
that
sure. Yeah, I don't know why he's irritated by it.
the expert's a git.
Well, I don't know.
Is this emblematic of what was really going on within Fujitsu?
No.
People that criticise us are to be condemned.
No.
People that have the temerity to question the quality of our product are to be condemned.
No.
Let's look at the substance of what he said. 1558, please. I'm going to take this shortly. You have seen this, it's been disclosed to you, you've read it.
Yes.
Would you agree that the suggestion that let's have him in and see whether we can get him to alter his view has gone? and that in its place is essentially a hardening up still further of the position against the expert. If you want to take a moment to read it all, then please do.
No. So I think we were trying to provide further information and clarity to the expert. To provide him with the access to the data and the records that we said we had and he hadn't got access to.
Okay. If we move on, please, to 1561. The next day, the 12th of March, Mr. Holmes emails you, setting out at the bottom of the page, if we just scroll down, a draft email for you to consider. And then go back to the top of the page. He says, Colin, draft email to Jim Cruz for you to consider. I've transferred the contentious statements from the paper to the email because it's not in our interest to piss the expert off. That said, it has to be pointed out to Jim that his report is far from impartial. Did you agree with that? That the expert's report was not impartial?
I'm not sure about far from impartial.
What about a little bit from impartial?
Well, I think a little bit from impartial, yes.
And why was he not impartial?
Because I think having read the report again, I thought it was quite high level.
Does that make somebody impartial?
Yes. Well,
Why?
not that the brevity of it doesn't make it impartial.
He continues, in truth, we have a problem because there's little we can do to dispel some of his assertions other than say rubbish. We can't demonstrate that everything worked correctly because we don't have the data. In addition, any proving that we do now is at a 2004 system baseline and not a 2000 baseline. Poll have to decide what they want to see happening here. I understand the reputational aspects of the situation, but I fear that POA, that's Fujitsu, are on the back foot.
Yes.
Why did he think that Fujitsu was on the back foot?
Because we haven't had the opportunity to try and provide additional material to the expert.
You hadn't had the opportunity to?
Provide the data that we had come up with to which the expert said he hasn't got.
Why hadn't you had that opportunity?
Because we had only invited, through Post Office, we'd invited the expert to Fujitsu's premises to review the data. So it was an invitation to Post Office to carry that forward.
Well, that was on the internal draft. That never got sent, did it? Let's get him in, that draft.
No, in the top of the last one, it says we invited him to Bracknell. Or
that one?
Yeah.
And did you think that was the solution to the problem?
I thought it might help.
Scrolling down on this page, just before we take the break, you'll see in the draft email, it says in the third paragraph of the draft email, the attached paper provides detailed feedback to his reply, but in truth, we can only reiterate what has been already said. Given that he has assumed the moral high ground and appears not to want to shift his position, the next step is to make him available to the people, data and resources at Post Office account and allow him to address his doubts to the true experts and practitioners. you approved this and it went out in this form, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Holmes is suggesting that Mr. Coyne be allowed to address his doubts to the true experts. Did you think that Mr. Coyne was not a true expert?
So Mr. Coyne was an IT expert, not a Horizon expert.
So you didn't think he was a true expert?
No, I didn't say that.
He wasn't sufficiently expert in Horizon?
Correct.
So the true experts were located only within the Fujitsu premises at Bracknell, were they?
They would the ones who would know that, well, not necessarily, but mostly that they would know the system and the processes that went around it.
It continues, in conclusion, it has to be said that his analysis of the situation is at best selective and at worst simply wrong, and his conclusions are partial. So again, accusing him of lacking partiality. Yes? You understand what partiality means,
Yes.
don't you? Favouring one side in the dispute over the other.
Yes.
Are you being biased?
Yes.
On what evidence were you happy to sign this off, that the independent expert was biased?
Probably because of his responses were unshifting. Unshifting.
So somebody who doesn't move from their opinion is biased?
No, what I've said is what I've said. Potentially, I go back to this data availability. It's kind of a cross between the email and email chain, really, here. That the data that was available was offered, the visits were offered, and from our particular position, he has his own view. His view. I'm not necessarily. We're saying that maybe his conclusions are partial. Okay. That's his view. We said he was not. We didn't think he was completely correct. So that in which instance that must be that he must be partial.
So somebody who is incorrect is always partial and therefore biased?
You can come to conclusions from data that is not complete.
Does that make you partial and therefore biased?
It may not make you partial, but you may make you biased.
And was the thought process that you have just explained to us one that was common within practitioners within Fujitsu who were discussing this issue?
So within the practitioners who are discussing it within Fujitsu, I think we were trying to make all opportunities available in order to come up with a rounded position.
Yes, thank you. So I wonder whether we could take the afternoon break now until 3:20.
Yep, certainly.
If it helps, I'll conclude by 4 o'clock, allowing some time for other core participants to ask questions if they wish.
All right, fine.
Thank you. 3:20. Good afternoon, sir. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lenton-Smith, can we turn to FUJ 0012-1602, please? We've now moved forward to April 2004, and there's an email from Jim Cruz at the foot of the page to Jan Holmes and Keith Baines, which is forwarded by Jan Holmes on the same day to you. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
And the email from Jim Cruz, he says, the latest development in this case is that Pol have written off the losses of just over £25,000 at the above SPO and have increased their payment into court to £25,000. And then the hope is that she will accept the increased payment in and the case will be concluded. If she does not and persists with her counterclaim, and she has indicated she's looking for a figure of £187,500, so she may well not settle. She's on increased risk as to the costs in the case if she does not meet the payment in at trial. As Post Office is no longer pursuing for losses, I hope that she will be left to pay any further evidence reports from the expert witness, which should be a further discouragement for her. So that was just updating you in April. And then if we move on, please, to FUJ 00121637. An email directly to you from Jan Holmes of the 7th of June 2004 with the subject of Cleveleys. He says, I've updated myself with the latest on this case and the news is not good. Jim Cruz has taken early retirement, so I ended up speaking to Mandy Talbot, who was his boss. The postmaster rejected the offer that was made to her some time ago, and a trial date has been set for August. The post officer is still taking advice as to how best to deal with this, and Mandy's view / belief was that the safest way to manage this is to throw money at it and get a confidentiality agreement signed. She's not happy with the experts, in inverted commas, report, as she considers it to be not well balanced and wants, if possible, to keep it out of the public domain. This is unlikely to happen if it goes to court. She was talking about taking the option to admit the report and concede that the contents are an accurate reflection of what happened. The HSH transcripts are an accurate reflection of what happened. It's just the, quote, expert, end quote, opinion is the problem. The liability question is removed, and then it's just about how much money to go away and keep your mouth shut, in inverted commas. One concern I have is that while they've been dickering about waiting for guidance from their agents, the trial date has been set, and it's now too late for them to enter a witness statement that might further repudiate the expert's original report. This means that their counsel may have to have thorough briefing by us before going to court. Do we need to involve Masons at this stage? Did the contents of this email reflect your understanding of Pole's principal desire, namely to keep the adverse expert's report out of the public domain?
I didn't know what Pole's objective was.
Did you engage in any telephone discussion with anyone at Pole, Keith Baines, for example,
No.
about this case?
No.
Who were Masons?
Pinsent Masons, solicitors.
Why would it be necessary to involve a firm of solicitors at that stage?
I think this is just Jan's question to me, high-level question internally. I don't think we did.
What was the risk for Fujitsu in this process?
In what process?
A claim was being brought by the post office against one of its former sub-postmistresses. She had counterclaimed. What's the risk to Fujitsu?
On that basis, none.
Why might you involve solicitors?
It was his question to me, so he's not a commercial person. He's just asking me a question.
Yes. What did you think of the suggestion?
Do we have my response to him? No. So this is just an update, and it didn't go any further than that.
Did you think it was necessary to involve solicitors?
No.
What did you think as to the strategy of paying Mrs. Wolstenholme enough money to, quote, keep your mouth shut?
So, remember, Fujitsu is a supplier to post office, maybe a big supplier. So we are a third party, effectively, who we don't get involved in persuading or suggesting to our clients how they should conduct their legal matters.
Was there any sense at this stage, did you pick up any sense from Mr. Holmes at this stage that the post office might be trying to blame Fujitsu for being in this position?
No.
Can we look, please, at Fujitsu 0012-1668? This is an email to you from Mr. Holmes of the following month. The Pole legal person, Mandy Talbot, is on holiday today, but will be back on Monday. I've also spoken to Keith Baines, who alluded to a number of other calls that he was going to have to make on the case, but didn't pass any details to me. He said that Dave Smith would be speaking to Ian on the subject. Can you help us who this Dave Smith referred to here is?
Dave Smith was the lead in post office for effectively managing the Horizon system.
And who would Ian be?
Ian is Ian Lamb.
And what role did Ian Lamb perform?
He was the managing director, effectively, of post office account.
In Fujitsu?
In Fujitsu.
So a high-level discussion
Yeah, yeah.
at proper director level?
Director level, yeah.
Yeah.
Although I don't think Ian was in fact a director, and a registered director as such.
He continues, it seems that Dave believes we, not sure whether that's the royal we or just us, have conceded what, quote, we should not have done, and Pole are now in a difficult position. Given our late involvement by Pole, I trust he's not trying to park it all on us. That's what I was referring to a moment ago when I asked whether you got any sense from Mr. Holmes that Pole would be trying to blame Fujitsu for being in the position they were in.
No, I don't believe so. I don't read it like that. I mean, I think this is Jan's interpretation of a conversation, but this is, a fourth-hand conversation. So a conversation between Dave Smith and Ian, and Dave Smith and Keith Baines and Jan Holmes, and then me. So I think it's kind of hearsay, really.
Can we move forwards, please? FUJ 0012-1724. We're now in the next month, August. On the 20th of August, an email from Jan Holmes to you and Bill Mitchell. Can you see that?
Yes.
What role did Bill Mitchell perform?
I'm not sure. I think there's a witness statement from him in the bundle, and I would have to refer to that too.
Okay, you can't remember now.
I can't remember his role, no.
The title is Risk Position on Litigation Support.
He could have been the risk manager, I guess, but I'd have to go and check that.
He says, Colin, Bill, following on from the Cleveleys outcome, what looks like the reappearance of Shobnall Road and the possible outcome of that case, I believe we should consider a risk position around litigation support. What do you understand a risk position around litigation support to mean?
So I can't remember precisely 2004, but I think it would be assessing to see whether Fujitsu needed litigation support if there was a risk in trying to defend the system. Oh,
I see. Rather than assessing the risk of Fujitsu providing litigation support to Post Office.
Could be that. I don't know. I couldn't say.
It's difficult to understand, isn't it, through that
Yes.
fantastic use of the word around. He continues, one, although Cleveleys may appear to be closed, it could be construed that Post Office bought off Mrs. Wolstenholme rather than defend their system. Do you agree with the suggestion that it appeared, or may appear, that Post Office had bought off Mrs. Wolstenholme rather than defend their system?
Again, I'll go back to the comment before, is that it's simply down to Post Office how they defended their legal cases, effectively, and whether they decided to settle out of court or go to court was a matter for them.
That's an answer to a different question, namely, whose responsibility and function is it to decide whether or not Post Office defend or settle cases? The answer is the one you've just given. It's a matter for Post Office. My question was a different one. Did you agree with the suggestion that it may appear that the Post Office had bought Mrs. Wolstenholme off rather than defend their system?
I don't think it's for me I don't think it's for me on behalf of Fujitsu to construe anything from how they defended their case.
Mr. Holmes continues in his email to you. Even if a gagging order is placed on the woman, I think the woman is Julie Wolstenholme, yes?
Yeah.
She apparently had a gaggle, and I think a gaggle here in this context means a group of disorderly people rather than a flock of geese. Agreed? Mm-hmm. Lined up to support her case, and they may well be aware of what the final outcome was. Is that how Fujitsu viewed matters? That the sub-postmistress was to be referred to as the woman who had a gaggle, a disorderly group of people surrounding her?
No.
He continues, I'm sure that they will not be keeping quiet. It's not clear why Post Office chose to settle rather than fight, although I suspect they realised that to expose the HSH transcripts in court would not help their case. Personally, I can understand that position. Why would exposure of the HSH transcripts in court not help their case?
I don't know. I don't think it would. Don't think it undermines the case.
So the revelation of 85 transcripts of Mrs. Wolstenholme calling over a 10-month period, setting out a succession of recurring problems, causing unexplained discrepancies and balancing errors, would have helped their case, would it?
No.
So what he's saying is right, isn't it, Mr. Holmes?
What Mr. Holmes is saying is right, yes.
Exposing the transcripts wouldn't have helped their case.
It wouldn't have done, no.
No, he's right, isn't he?
He's right.
And by throwing money at the problem, buying the woman off, with or without a gagging order, the Post Office were ensuring that what was revealed by these transcripts was not publicly known, wasn't it?
It would appear so.
He continues in paragraph 2.
I mean, that's his language, not mine.
Did you write back to him and say...
I don't know, is there another email?
No.
No. I don't know.
Can you help us with this? We've seen the earlier report from Mr. Holmes to you, commenting on Mr. Coyne's document, and then we've seen the version that was sent to the post office. In both of those, it was said that the number and nature of the calls were all perfectly normal, that they weren't indicative of any system problem, and that, in general terms, they were usual in the operation of a complex computer system.
Yes.
Why would revelations of transcripts, therefore, if that was true, not help the post office's case?
Well, I've got nothing to compare. I don't know what the transcript said. You've told me that there are a number of pages, but I don't know whether they're comparable to the other transcripts of the other examples that were shown in the table.
According to Mr. Holmes, the number of them were.
Well, they were similar. They were comparable number of calls, so the transcripts were probably comparable.
I don't understand, you see. The reports that he was giving to you, and a version of which you sent on, was saying to the post office, there's nothing to see here with these HSH calls.
Exactly, yeah.
And yet here you're discussing internally, I can completely understand, I can understand that public revelation of the transcripts in court won't help the post office's case. It doesn't add up, does it?
So it's kind of I'm in speculation here, so I've got nothing to substantiate it. But I don't know whether there's anything significant about the HSH transcripts for Cleveleys compared to the HSH transcripts for the other examples that were in the table. So I can't comment whether it's just the extent of transcripts is an issue, or whether there's anything more significant than that.
He continues, Shobnall Road has come back. Do you know what Shobnall Road was?
I assume it was another post office.
Bill has apparently been asked to provide a witness statement to the effect that nothing contained in the HSH calls over the period in question could have caused or be described as a system malfunction. I'm attaching a brief analysis of the HSH transcripts that I did in April. Comments made by engineers that, quote, keyboards can cause phantom transactions do not help post office's position. I suspect that we cannot make the statement required. That's the statement that nothing contained in the calls over the period in question could have caused or be described as a system malfunction.
Yep.
And when post office read the transcripts in detail, they may well think that they could not submit them anyway. Point 3. How many more Cleveleys and Shobnall Road howlers exist in the HSH archive? 2 out of 2 is a bit of a worry. How long before Post Office realised that they cannot rely on HSH transcripts to counter claims made by postmasters that they want to prosecute or have to defend against claims of wrongful dismissal and to seek to recover settlement costs from Fujitsu? I think this warrants a bit more thought. Was a bit more thought given after receipt of this email, to your recollection?
There was the report, there was an internal report which was written about the Cleveleys case.
Yes, the September 2004 report. That doesn't really make any recommendations, does it?
No.
It's just
a
straight up and down narration of what happened.
It happened, yeah.
What I'm talking about, whether this opportunity was seized to grip the problems that had been revealed.
So, on the face of it, none of this is a commercial issue. In other words, affecting discussion between Post Office Commercial and Fujitsu. It's kind of an operational matter dealt with through the service organisation. So any taking forward of these issues would have been done at that level.
Could we look at that report, please? FUJ 00121747. FUJ 00121747. You'll see that this is dated the 1st of September. It's written by Jan Holmes, and at the foot of the page, you gave approval for it.
Yes.
And in the abstract, it states that it describes the involvement of Fujitsu with Post Office security investigation in the matter of Cleveleys Post Office and the dispute between the Post Office and the Postmaster. If we look at the second page, please. It appears to have initially been drafted on the 29th of March and then updated on the 3rd of August following a request for assistance from Post Office Council. Do you know what that was?
No, I can't.
I.e. the Post Office and their council helping Fujitsu update its internal report.
We haven't got previous versions.
No.
Oh, I can't remember.
If we go to page 4, please, and look under the experts report. The report says the expert who was supposed to be jointly appointed. To your recollection, was he jointly appointed? i.e. by Post Office and
Well, not by
Mrs.
us.
Wolstenholme?
I believe so. The court appointed him, didn't they? Requested it, I believe so.
It's just the use of the language he was supposed to be jointly appointed. Was there any suggestion that he wasn't jointly appointed and he was only appointed by Mrs. Wolstenholme and the Post Office didn't have anything to do with it?
I can't comment on it.
Over the page, please. Third paragraph, we've offered to host him at any of our locations so he can analyse HSH data directly, speak to the experts and walk through the problem management cycle for himself. He will not have seen this offer since it was contained in the email that accompanied our final response, and this has not been passed on to the expert pending the outcome of an out-of-court settlement by Post Office to the Postmaster. So it was known by you within Fujitsu that the offer to the expert to come and visit the premises and meet the real experts had not got through to him.
So it transpired, yes.
Wasn't that the basis of some of your criticism earlier, that he hadn't taken up the offer?
No, I said he had not been able to take up the offer.
Because it had never been made to him.
Yes, we had made it. I said we had made it to Post Office to pass on to him.
I've got this right, I think. You made the suggestion that various offers should be made to the expert, put them to Post Office, but Post Office never put them to the expert. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir, yes.
Thank you. Can we lastly turn to FUJ 0012 1636? These are the minutes of a meeting called the Horizon Commercial Forum, held on the 28th of April 2004, jointly between the Post Office and Fujitsu. Can you explain what the Horizon Commercial Forum was, please?
Yes, so this was the two commercial teams meeting periodically, I think monthly or thereabouts, to review ongoing commercial issues coming out of the contract and financial matters coming out of the contract to do with invoicing and various other matters like that. So it was an ongoing set of minutes on discussions taken, actions taken, noted, and follow-up of actions.
And we can see that there's three from each party present, 3 members of each party present.
Yes.
One of which is you.
Yes, that's right.
And how frequently did the commercial forum meet?
I was going to say monthly, but it's probably there or thereabouts, monthly, 2 monthly, but frequently.
Can we turn, please, to page 5? And look 3 rows from the bottom. KB, that's Keith Baines, suggested that when the Cleveleys court case had been concluded, a review is undertaken to find improvements in information storage for future cases.
Yes.
Was such a review undertaken?
I don't remember specifically, unless we have access to the subsequent minutes of the forum beyond this.
To your knowledge, was there ever anything more broadly contemplated rather than a review about storage of information, but a review of the substance of what the independent expert had said?
This is the final version of 16, is it?
Yes. If we go to Fujitsu 0012 1632. This is the email distributing the commercial forum minutes, number 16, final. If we scroll down, please. It says, Pam, please find final minutes attached. And the document I've shown you was an attachment to that email.
So I thought in that document we had said that, in my witness statement, we put that KB advised that Post Office were trying to negotiate a settlement at the time. They suggested a discussion should be held with both parties at some future to understand how the situation regarding the export could be avoided in the future.
Yes, if you look at page 3.
That. Yeah.
So if we go back to 1636, and look at page 3. And look at the third box down. There's the passage that you're just referring to. KB advised that the Post Office were trying to negotiate a settlement with regard to the Julie Wolstenholme case. Keith Bain further suggested that a discussion should be held between both parties at some future date to understand the situation regarding the, quote, expert could be avoided in the future.
Right.
That seems to be a suggestion, would you agree, that Fujitsu and Pol need to discuss how an expert like this might be appointed in the future and how we could avoid getting an expert like this rather than examining the substance of what the expert said and seeing whether it might be accurate or not, which is what I was asking about.
Yeah, so I think it's reliance on non-expert data. So not relying on an expert.
What did you understand the discussion in the future between both parties to be
To
about?
ensure that there was enough data evidence to support the system, given the context of how commercial Fujitsu and commercial post office viewed the system at the time.
Did that happen?
So I'd have to go back to the subsequent minutes after 16 to review what happened to that action point.
You've got no independent recollection. And we've got the minutes.
If you have the minutes. If you have the minutes, I don't know. I mean, if you can share the minutes.
Well, the subsequent minutes don't translate that action into action.
Well, potentially, I think that the matter passed away. In other words, there wasn't the requirement for the expert, because the number of instances that were raised at a commercial level in terms of prosecutions was so few.
What about the fact that the post office was using the self-same system as the basis for prosecuting people?
Can you just repeat the question?
Yes. What about the fact that the post office was using the self-same system, Horizon,
Yes.
and the data that it produced
Yes.
as the basis for prosecutions? Did anyone mention that in this context? We've had an expert report from somebody. We don't much like it, but we ought to check somehow to see whether what he's saying might have substance. Because we're using this system to prosecute people, some of whom are going to go to prison, some of whom families are going to be broken up, some of whom are not going to see their children.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand all of that. But at this point in time, I think there was just reliance on the system. I go back to the witness statements. You know, commercial view was the system was reliable.
And what was that view based on?
Based on the fact that they had produced data well, they hadn't come up to commercial. There had been instances where they had used the system's data to show that transactions were not, that the system was correct.
And I think what you're referring to here is, in particular, Mr. Baines's witness statement. Is that right?
It was partially that, but also the point that there was, in the discussion we've had earlier on from Jan Holmes, was that in the past that the use of transaction data had been successfully used in prosecutions.
So if we just look at, given you mentioned it a couple of times, what Mr. Baines said, it's poll 00118219. And it's page 3. It's a rather short witness statement if we scroll down. He says who he is in paragraph 1. He says that the contents are true to the best of his knowledge in 2. He explains Horizon in 3. Over the page, please. He says before January 2003, the Post Office was allowed 50 audit extraction requests per year within the fixed price of the service and subject to capacity limits if Fujitsu could purchase others at additional cost. System would have been fully checked before being issued at Cleveleys. Every branch has the same type of equipment. 5, I think this is the paragraph that you're referring to. Any faults that occurred in the Horizon system were eliminated once they were identified. Whilst it's possible for mistakes to occur, this is usually through incorrect inputting to the computer system in the office affected by the mistake. All sub-postmasters were fully trained in the use of the Horizon equipment. The system was fully tested before it was used, by the Post Office, and it is fit for its purpose. The system itself does not create losses, as is claimed by Mrs. Wolstenholme. Is that the long and the short of what you describe as the commercial view?
Yes.
Mr. Lenton-Smith, thank you very much. They're the only questions I ask. I think there are some questions from Mr. Jacobs and from not from Mr. Henry or Miss Patrick. So just one set of questions from call participants, if you just wait there.
Over to you, Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lenton-Smith, I represent 157 sub-postmasters and I'm instructed by Howe & Co. And I want to ask you about the Post Office's objectives in relation to Mr. Coyne's evidence. Now, you were taken to, we don't need to turn it up again, a letter from Jan Holmes to you, dated the 7th of June 2024, in which Mr. Holmes told you what Manny Talbot's view was at the Post,
Yes.
the Post Office view. The safest thing to do was to throw money at it, get a confidentiality agreement, and how much to go away and keep your mouth shut. You recall that?
Mm-hmm.
And when you were asked about it, you said that you didn't know what Post Office objectives were. Can I ask you to look at a document which you've already seen today, and which Ms. Hellawell looked at earlier on? It's POL 0009535. And if we can go down to the bottom of the first page. Here we have Mr. Holmes, we have Mr. Baines saying to you, in relation to the expert opinion, as I'm sure you will understand, Post Office is concerned by these findings, not only in relation to this particular case, but also because of any precedent that this may set, and that this might be used by Post Office's agents, sub-postmasters, to support claims that the Horizon system is causing errors in their branch accounts. So is it right to say that Mr. Baines, in this letter, was telling you that Post Office's objectives in relation to Mr. Coyne's evidence was to keep this away from the gaggle, as they were subsequently described, of sub-postmasters, so that they wouldn't be able to defend themselves against allegations that concern alleged shortfalls generated by Horizon?
Can you go back to the previous page, please?
Yes. The highlighted section.
Yes.
Post Office is concerned by these findings, not only in relation to this particular case, but also because of any precedent that this may set.
So this is in the absence of transaction data that was thought that would have substantiated the Post Office position. And in the absence of that, we have a report which Post Office subsequently found unacceptable. But that in itself, if it's published, would cause a precedent to be set. Otherwise, reliance on an expert's.
Yes, we heard evidence from, I don't know if you heard Mr. Coyne give evidence today. Yesterday. He stood by his report. He stood by his report at the time. Mm-hmm. There was a report which the Post Office didn't accept, yes, but it was capable of being used by sub-postmasters to defend themselves against the Post Office when the Post Office brought actions in relation to shortfalls. Yes. That's right, isn't it?
I would have thought so, if it's
yes,
in public domain, yes.
And then if we could also turn to FUJ 001-21486. And this is a letter, we'll wait for it to come up on the screen. This is, if we can go to the section that says background, and it's right at the bottom there, it's the last paragraph. So this is Jan Holmes's draft response to you, I believe, in respect of the letter that Keith Baines wrote to you, that we've just wrote to you, which we've just looked at. And we see some more about precedent here, but it's more specific. So it says, POL are concerned that the expert's opinion that the system was at fault might set a precedent against future prosecution. So it's quite clear, isn't it, that both Mr. Holmes and you knew what Post Office's objections were, or objectives amounted to, in respect of the expert report. They didn't want this being used by sub-postmasters in relation to defending themselves in prosecutions.
So the expert's report as it stood, which he hasn't changed, and which we were unable to persuade Post Office to provide more data, was the de facto basis that would be set as the precedent.
Do you accept that
This
is a very serious issue? As Mr. Beer has said, people were being prosecuted, they were in prison, they were not seeing their children. You were asked earlier on in your evidence today, why didn't Fujitsu have a rethink, given that at least on one view, what the expert was saying was right? And we know, don't we, that what he said about blue screening, money vanishing on reboot, that all came to pass. We know that it ultimately was right.
Yes, but we're talking about at the time. So this is we're talking about 2004.
Yeah.
What came to pass in the future, we obviously weren't aware of. The fact that there were technical issues around, I can't comment because I wasn't from a technical person, but I think in the statement, Holmes has made the point that when, as the technical issues arose, they were being dealt with through the Fujitsu support system.
But don't you think that it would have been best practice, instead of calling the expert a git, which Mr. Holmes did, instead of trying to dismiss what he'd said, to have a review based on the potential at the time that what Mr. Coyne was saying could be right, as it subsequently turned out to be?
So I'm not aware of what activities took place within the service function to take on board those comments. You talked about the blue screens, which I think they said that were being rectified, or any other issues that had been raised in his report. So that would be a one for record of the service function and or software development to come up with, or may have dealt with. But at a commercial level, these matters didn't arise because they were not of a commercial issue.
Why didn't you, just as a matter of good practice, have a rethink about the Horizon system as a result of the issues that the expert had raised?
I don't know that we didn't.
Well, you said you didn't.
I don't know. I didn't, personally. I'm talking about me personally. I didn't. But I'm not sure whether the functions that were surrounded the system did.
Well, we know that in September 2004 there was a review of the Cleveleys case and that there were no recommendations made. So nothing was done. Is that fair?
On the basis that nothing was happened, no recommendations came out of the Cleveleys report.
My
potentially
clients take the view that when one looks at the views of Mandy Talbot, when one looks at the correspondence that we've looked at between Mr. Holmes and yourself, it's quite clear that Post Office was seeking to cover up their own expert opinion that showed that Horizon was defective because they didn't want that to get out to sub-postmasters. Do you accept that's a fair summary of what Post Office were doing at the time?
He didn't conclude that the system was defective. He construed that it might be defective, but he didn't have proof to say that it was defective. But, just say your question again, sorry.
My question to you is that the Post Office was seeking to cover up the expert report because they didn't want sub-postmasters to find out what Mr. Coyne had found.
I can't really comment on that.
And I have to suggest to you that your actions in failing to respond appropriately to Mr. Coyne were complicit in this cover-up. In failing to undertake a review and in seeking to dismiss rather than investigate.
As I said, I don't know whether we didn't do that. I mean, there may not have been recommendations in the internal report on the Cleveleys case, but I can't comment. And we have described that as a result of particular issues, they were pushed through the first, second, third, and fourth line of support issues, and to rectify the issues. So I can't say that they were not acted upon. There's no evidence to say they were not acted upon.
Well, thank you. I just might have some further questions for you. No, I haven't. That's all I have for you.
Okay, thank you.
The impression I get, Mr. Lenton-Smith, is that you consider, and for all I know at the moment, you may be right, that it would not have been for you personally or your department to take forward an investigation of the extent to which Mr. Coyne's opinions might be valid. Right?
Yes.
Tell me whether you think there was a department or a person within Fujitsu who would have been charged to take forward such an investigation if it was carried out. In other words, can you point me in the right direction so that I can investigate whether the appropriate person in Fujitsu carried out any investigation?
So I think within the service infrastructure, service department that managed the first, second, third line of support functions, the service director may well have, is possibly the person to whom those corrective measures should have been applied. Any software development bugs, issues which I'm sure you've been through, would fall to the software development, software services director.
So I don't want to make this too simplistic, but through Mr. Holmes, and Mr. Holmes is a technical man, isn't he?
Yes.
Through Mr. Holmes, if Fujitsu wanted to, they would be able to ascertain sufficient information about the expert's opinion, and then through Mr. Holmes, engage the right people in Fujitsu to carry out such investigation as was necessary in order to validate or disprove what the expert had been saying.
Yes.
And so I understand it could have been done, and I understand your evidence to be that you don't know if it was done.
That's correct.
Fine. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming to give evidence to me, and thanks for the witness statement.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's all of our evidence today. We resume, I think, at 10 o'clock tomorrow.
You gave me a shock then, Mr. Deere.
It would have given Mr. Blake a shock too, because he's asking the questions tomorrow.
Right, so it's just Mr. Holmes tomorrow, is it? Yeah.
It is, yes, thank you.
All right, 10 o'clock tomorrow.